In many walks of life, the term "what if" is used. What if this happened instead of that? In sports, the term is often used with many fans wondering what would have happened if their team acquired a player or if a player had scored at a certain moment in a game to lead their team to a victory, perhaps even a Stanley Cup. Today on Big Apple Hockey, we take a look at the top 10 New York Rangers what-ifs and how drastically each one of these scenarios could alter the history of the team. Before we start, this video is sponsored by SeatGeek. Ranger fan, Islander fan, looking to go to a concert or even a wrestling show? Use promo code BIGAppleHockey for $20 off your first order with SeatGeek and take advantage of a nice discount. June 24th, 2006. After a 4-game sweep at the hands of the rival New Jersey Devils, the New York Rangers approached the 2006 NHL entry draft looking for help on defense even after drafting then top prospect Mark Stahl the year prior. They would select Bobby Sanguinetti at 22nd or 21st overall, who was one of the better puck-moving defenders in the draft. A pick later, the rival Philadelphia Flyers would take Claude Giroux, who was known as one of the better playmaking forwards in the draft, who had scored 39 goals and 103 points with the Gatineau Olympiques in the QMJHL. The fallout from this was that Giroux would not make his debut until the 08-09 season, scored 9 goals and 27 points in 42 games, but his following season in 2009-2010 was the real coming-out party. After a solid second full season of 16 goals and 47 points in 82 games, Giroux established himself as a big-time star in the 2010 playoffs, finishing 6th in scoring in the postseason, and Philadelphia's run to the Stanley Cup Finals with 10 goals and 21 points in 23 games. The following year, Giroux would register 25 goals and 76 points, and in the following year, in 2011-2012, where he'd end up playing on a line with the returning Jaromir Jagr and Scott Hartnell, Giroux would put up his best numbers to that point with a then career high 28 goals and 93 points, and would end up on the following year's cover of EA Sports NHL 13. Giroux would be a steady producer for the Flyers, but would start to decline a bit until 2017-18 season, where Giroux recorded career highs in goals with 34, assists with 68, and points with 102, while finishing 4th in the Hart Trophy voting. Giroux would stay with the Flyers until the 21-22 season, where he was dealt to the Florida Panthers prior to the 2022 trade deadline. Sanguinetti would not make his debut until the 2009-2010 season, in which he would play 5 games. It was reported that he was in Coach John Tortorella's doghouse for showing up to training camp out of shape. At the end of that season, he would be traded to Carolina for a 6th-round pick in 2010, which ended up becoming Jesper Fast, and a 2nd-round pick in 2011, which was traded to the Calgary Flames in the Tim Erickson trade. Giroux would have killed 2 birds with 1 stone, giving the Rangers a franchise forward to build around after Jaromir Jagr's departure, while taking one away from Philadelphia. If you remember, the Rangers and the Flyers had a home-and-home series to decide who would be the 8th seed heading into the 2010 Stanley Cup playoffs. Giroux scored the shootout winner for the Flyers, as he was the 2nd player to score on one place. He might have even been playing on a line with Marian Gaborik in New York. So it's possible that Giroux's emergence would have had them, 1, making the playoffs, and 2, picking a lot lower than the 10th overall pick that the Rangers used on Dylan McIlrath. More on that later on in this countdown. I promise this is not just a countdown of draft blunders, but we had to start it off with these 2. Your season ended in a shootout loss in the last game to decide who would be the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. The Rangers went into the 2010 NHL entry draft and selected Dylan McIlrath with the 10th selection. If you watch the video, there's a notable gasp in the crowd as McIlrath was not expected to be taken as early as the Rangers took him, with other notable prospects on the board such as Cam Fowler and Vladimir Tarasenko. Many viewed this as another knee-jerk reaction akin to their 1995 trade of Sergei Zubov and Petr Nedved to Pittsburgh after being bullied and bested once again by these same Philadelphia Flyers. The fallout from this is that Fowler would pay immediate dividends for Anaheim, scoring 10 goals and 40 points as a rookie, and would be the anchor of Anaheim's defense up until he was dealt to St. Louis. Tarasenko, for a 2-year span, was considered arguably the best prospect in the sport, putting up excellent numbers in a KHL league that was known for giving minutes to senior players over younger players. By Tarasenko's third year in the NHL, he was a 30-goal, 70-point player. And for a 5-year span, from the 2014-15 season to the 2018-19 season, Tarasenko scored 30 goals and 60 points every year, including a 40-goal campaign and 3 consecutive 70-point campaigns, a period in which he was among the most productive wingers in the NHL, and would win the Stanley Cup with the St. Louis Blues in 2019. After a career year in 21-22, which saw him record a career-high 82 points, he was dealt to the New York Rangers in the mid-season trade in the following 2022-23 season. He would score 8 goals and 21 points in 31 games and add 3 goals and 4 points in a 7-game series loss to the rival New Jersey Devils. McIlrath, on the other hand, would not make his debut until the 2013-14 season and would play only 38 career games for the Rangers before being dealt to the Florida Panthers in November of 2016 for a conditional 2018 7th-round pick and Steven Kampfer. I hope Ranger fans remember that name, because that's one of those obscure names during a time where they were not good. For a hypothetical impact, at the time of the 2010 NHL draft, Cam Fowler would have been a welcome addition to a blue line that lacked puck movers at the time, even with the emergence of then-rookie Michael Del Zotto, as Ryan McDonough would make his NHL debut in the upcoming season on a pairing with fellow young defensive stalwart Michael Sauer. Conversely, Tarasenko would have given the Rangers the sniper that they needed to go along with Marian Gaborik. Maybe the Rangers moved some of their other pieces at the 2012 deadline to go get Rick Nash, which would have helped put them over the top against the New Jersey Devils, as he could have repeated his performance from the 2010 Olympics, in which he shut down Ilya Kovalchuk. I'm not sure if the Rangers could have beaten the Kings in 2012, but at least they would have avoided a loss to a bitter rival and would have had a chance at a Stanley Cup.
I met a little girl and we danced all night. I didn't get her home until about midnight. Her daddy was so mad he nearly clobbered me. How was I to know he was a referee? We did the hockey talk right.
November 7th, 1975, the New York Rangers and the Boston Bruins make a trade that shook the entire hockey world and the foundations of both teams, as the Rangers traded a 27-year-old Brad Park and a 35-year-old John Rattel, plus Joe Zanussi, to the Boston Bruins for a 33-year-old Phil Esposito and a 30-year-old Carol Vladimir. To follow that up, the following May 26, 1976, the Rangers traded 22-year-old upstart, up-and-coming center Rick Middleton to the Boston Bruins for 32-year-old Ken Hotch, in what was the first of many notable trades in which the Rangers traded an up-and-coming star for a past-prime veteran, and is regarded as one of the most lopsided trades in NHL history. Boston would get 5 to 7 very good seasons out of Rattel and Park, respectively, while New York would get 4 to 5 very good seasons out of Vladimir and Esposito, with Esposito being a driving force on their way to the 1979 Stanley Cup Finals, in which Esposito scored 20 points, finishing third in postseason scoring. From the second trade, Middleton would go on to score 898 points in 881 games over 12 seasons in Boston, cementing him as one of the best scorers of the 80s. This would include 6 consecutive point-per-game seasons, 5 consecutive seasons of 90 or more points, and 2 100-point campaigns, while Hodge would score 68 points in 96 games with the Rangers, and 62 of those were in his first season in New York. The hypothetical impact from this is that the Rangers likely stay the course as a team that is competitive, but likely not good enough to win it all, and likely don't make the Stanley Cup Finals run in 1979, as they probably don't get past the Islanders. However, not making these two deals would have served them better in the 80s, as it seemed like the Rangers needed a couple of pieces to help them get past the Islanders in the 1982 and 83 playoffs, one on offense and one on defense. That's where Middleton, who was highly productive until 1987, and Park, who was highly productive until his last 2 seasons in Detroit, would come into play. Now, would they have beaten the Islanders? It's not a guarantee.
Not a guarantee.
Would those 2 pieces have helped? Absolutely. And if they could beat the Islanders in even one of those series, maybe they can win a Stanley Cup. June 21st, 2003, at the 2003 NHL entry draft, the New York Rangers draft a relatively unknown and unproven prospect named Hugh Jessiman, who is playing for Dartmouth in a somewhat weak NCAA conference with the 12th overall pick. And the first round of the 2003 NHL entry draft would later be recognized as one of the greatest first rounds ever and one of the greatest draft classes ever, with names like Marc-Andre Fleury, Eric Stahl, Thomas Vanek, Jeff Carter, Dustin Brown, Brent Seabrook, Zach Parise, Ryan Getzlaf, Corey Perry, Brent Burns, Ryan Kessler, and Mike Richards, all becoming top-end players for respective teams. Some consider the Rangers drafting of Hugh Jessiman to be the biggest draft miss ever. The fallout from this is that Jessiman was the only player in the first round to play single-digit games in the NHL, playing 2 games, registering no points.
Ooh, that's bad.
Sean Bell was the only other player drafted in that first round, 30th overall by the St. Louis Blues, to play less than 100 games in the NHL. Jessiman's development was hampered by injuries, but once he left Dartmouth to play in the AHL, it was apparent that he was never going to reach his necessary level in order for him to be an NHL regular, even getting sent down to the ECHL in the first 2 professional seasons after leaving Dartmouth. Notable players who went after Jessiman were the aforementioned Brown, 13th overall, Seabrook, 14th overall, Parise, 17th overall, Getzlaf, 19th overall, Brent Burns, 20th overall, Kessler, 23rd overall, Richards, 24th overall, and Perry, 28th overall. For a hypothetical impact, for argument's sake, this scenario could be if the Rangers took any of the notable names that I just mentioned above, but I'm going to stick with the 4 most notable players in here, in Parise, Getzlaf, Burns, and Perry, which have all played games post-COVID stoppage. Each of these players were franchise building block type players for their respective teams, and I think it's safe to assume that none of these prospects at that time would have had any bearing on the Rangers pulling off the Jaromir Jagr trade, even with Burns making his debut in the 03-04 season as a winger. To have a young Getzlaf, Parise, or Perry come up 2005 post-lockout with the Jagr and Friends crew would give them a shot in the arm offensively, while Brent Burns might have been the answers to the struggle at the point on the power play. And each of these franchise types would be a much welcomed addition to a Rangers roster that struggled after Jagr's departure. Maybe there's no Brad Richards signing in 2011. Maybe the July 2012 trade that landed Rick Nash in New York doesn't happen. This could change Rangers history as we know it. March 21st, 1994. The New York Rangers make 2 separate deals, trading Tony Amonte and Chicago Blackhawks for Brian Noonan and Stefan Matteau, and Mike Gartner to the Toronto Maple Leafs for Glenn Anderson, Scott Malone, and a 1994 fourth-round pick, which ended up being Alexander Korobolin. In the first deal, Neil Smith made a trade that he was quoted as hesitant to make, trading a 23-year-old Amonte who scored 68 goals and 145 points in his first 2 seasons after Amonte did not mesh with new coach Mike Keenan's style of play. In the second trade, one that angered many Ranger fans, Neil Smith dealt fan favorite Gartner as Mike Keenan was not a fan of his and wanted a tougher and grittier winger for the playoff run. Despite both being in the 1979 draft, Gartner was almost a full year older than Anderson, but was more productive, scoring 28 goals and 52 points in 71 games before his trade, as opposed to Anderson's 17 goals and 35 points in 73 games, as Anderson had been on the decline since Edmonton's last Cup win in 1990. The Rangers went 6-0 against the Devils in the season series, including 5-0 before the trades happened, outscoring New Jersey 20-7. Gartner registered 5 goals and 3 assists in those 5 games, with Amonte registering a goal and an assist. Fallout from this was that Anderson would score 4 goals and 6 points in 12 games with the Rangers to end the regular season, and in 23 playoff games, he would score 3 goals and 6 points, despite playing a majority of those minutes on the top line with Mark Messier and Adam Graves. However, at various points during that playoff run, including the infamous Game 6 guarantee game against the Devils in the Eastern Conference Finals, Alexei Kovalov would be moved up from second-line center to first-line right wing, forming a power line with Messier and Graves, who would play some of the best hockey of their postseasons away from Anderson, who underwhelmed. Gartner would score 6 goals and 12 points in 10 games to end the regular season with Toronto, while in 18 playoff games, he would score 5 goals and 11 points, and like the rest of the Leafs, he was shut down in the Western Conference Finals against the Vancouver Canucks. Now, the hypothetical impact here is that Keenan wanted a tougher and grittier team to go up against the Devils, but the regular season showed that the Rangers' speed and skill gave the Devils fits, and the numbers backed it up completely. Although Amonte would need no Matteau, who scored 2 double overtime winners in the series, including probably the biggest goal in franchise history in Game 7, the Matteau goal. Thank you, Harry Rose. Having both Amonte and Gartner would have given the Rangers the speed and skill that they lacked, and they might not have had to go to 7 games against the Devils. This is an argument that can be made, and there's evidence to back it up. From 95 to 2002, Amonte was one of the most productive wingers in the NHL, scoring 25 or more goals in 7 consecutive seasons, and in 6 consecutive seasons, 30 or more, including 2 campaigns with 40 or more goals. Amonte was a part of the gold medal winning U.S. World Cup of Hockey team in 1996 and made the U.S. Olympic team in 1998 and in 2002, and was a big-time sniper that the Rangers lacked for many years. Gartner, who was a fan favorite, would be a perennial 30-goal scorer until 1997, and his scoring prowess would have been helpful, especially against Pittsburgh in their 1996 second-round playoff series. The Rangers had a habit of making trades in the following seasons to battle against different types of opponents in the playoffs, only to face an opponent that they did not build a team to play against, and it cost them in consecutive years against Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. August 31st, 1995. The New York Rangers trade Sergei Zubov and Petr Nedved to the Pittsburgh Penguins for Luc Robitaille and Ulf Samuelsson in a deal that's regarded by some as the worst in franchise history, and which set the franchise back for a decade, dealing a 25-year-old future Hall of Fame defenseman in Zubov and a 23-year-old talented center in Nedved for a 29-year-old Robitaille and a 31-year-old Samuelsson, which was viewed as a knee-jerk reaction as those two were past their prime at that point. It was a knee-jerk reaction to getting bullied by Philadelphia in their 1995 second-round playoff series. Rumors still go around to this day that Captain Mark Messier, who had Neil Smith's ear, was not a fan of either Zubov and Nedved and was not happy about their efforts against Philadelphia, citing that they were too soft to win a Stanley Cup. The fallout from this is that Nedved immediately paid dividends for Pittsburgh in his first year, scoring a career-high 44 goals and 99 points, while Zubov would score 11 goals and 66 points in 64 games and finish 12th in Norris Trophy voting, while both helped eliminate the Rangers in the second round of the 1996 playoffs. Zubov, however, did not have a great series against the Florida Panthers in the Eastern Conference Finals and was viewed as a scapegoat, being dealt to Dallas for Kevin Hatcher, where Zubov would win another cup in 1999. Nedved would miss the entire 1997-98 season due to a contract dispute and was then traded from Pittsburgh back to New York early in the 1998-99 season in a deal that saw Alexei Kovalev go to Pittsburgh. The hypothetical impact from this is that Sergei Zubov would have been an all-star defenseman for years in New York and would have kept one of the best power play point tandems in the NHL together. In addition to affecting Pittsburgh's 1995-96 season, Zubov would have been in New York into the late 2000s well after Brian Leetch's retirement. As for Nedved, it's likely that the Rangers don't sign Ray Ferraro, who they had signed a few weeks before the trade, and Nedved is there long-term, which means that the deal that occurred in November 1998 that sends Alexei Kovalev to Pittsburgh doesn't happen, and there's a completely different team in New York. Maybe the Dark Ages never happened. Neil Smith was seen by many as by trying to keep 1994 alive with the deals that he made in the years after the Cup win, when really all he needed to do was to keep Zubov and Nedved in New York and make the right moves otherwise to keep the Rangers a true Cup threat. August 7th, 1997. Fresh off their Eastern Conference Finals loss to the Philadelphia Flyers, then-President Dave Checketts ordered Neil Smith to acquire arguably the best player in the world. The Rangers would sign Joe Sakic to a 3-year, $21 million offer sheet with an upfront $15 million signing bonus. Checketts had inside information about his old pal Charlie Lyon's Colorado Avalanche finances. The Avalanche were losing money and needed to renovate the old McNichols Arena. General manager Pierre Lacroix would have to match the offer sheet, or their future Hall of Fame center would take his talents to Broadway. If you want more information about this and a whole entire documentary for it, watch the Saving Sakic documentary. It's a must-watch for any true hockey fan.
It was a positive thought of that you might get him. You might get him. You know, we're going to have Joe Sakic. It's okay that Messier left. We're going to have Joe Sakic, probably the best player in the league at that point, right?
Yeah.
But then when you don't get him because they match, everybody's pissed because their little dream didn't come true that they're going to get Sakic, so they're all mad.
The fallout from this is that a film company named Comsat, who also owned the Colorado Avalanche, and another production company called Ascent were both in on the production of the hit movie Air Force One, which starred Harrison Ford. That movie would make $315 million at the box offices off of an $85 million budget. Ascent came away with $68.1 million from the movie, and the windfall from this covered the financing from the new arena, which would become the Pepsi Center, and would give them money left over to match the offer sheet, which the Avalanche matched on September 21st, 1997.
Get off my plane.
The Rangers, after Mark Messier signed a 3-year, $18 million deal with Vancouver in July, were left in limbo. Neil Smith would pivot and would trade a second-round pick in 1998, which ended up becoming Andrew Peters, and future considerations for a 32-year-old Pat LaFontaine who had an extensive history of concussions and other injuries. LaFontaine was still a very good player and had a pretty good season in New York, but That was cut short when he collided with teammate Mike Keane in practice, resulting in the final concussion that would end his career. The Rangers would thus enter what would be known by Ranger fans as the Dark Ages, where they would miss the playoffs for 8 seasons and not make it again until the 2006 postseason after the NHL and NHLPA locked out the 2004-2005 season due to a dispute over a new collective bargaining agreement, which included a salary cap. Hypothetical impact here, this is a big one. One of the absolute biggest. As if the Sakic offer sheet was successful, Sakic would have joined Wayne Gretzky in New York as one of the most lethal 1-2 punches at center, as Gretzky was still productive even in his late 30s. This likely means that the Dark Ages never happened, and the roster makeup is drastically different. Maybe Pavel Bure comes to New York instead of South Florida in 1999, as Neil Smith tries to make another push for a Stanley Cup. Maybe Sakic's arrival delays Wayne Gretzky's retirement. At the very least, Neil Smith might not have been fired in 2000, and the progression of Rangers history has changed drastically and for the better. Could they have won a cup with Sakic and Gretzky down the middle? Who knows? June 20th, 1992, the Quebec Nordiques GM Marcel Aubut traded Eric Lindros in 2 separate deals on the same day at the NHL draft in 1992 to Philadelphia and the New York Rangers. The supposed return for the Rangers reportedly included one of Mike Richter or John Van Beesbrook, Tony Amonte, James Patrick, Sergei Nemchinov, Alexei Kovalov, multiple first-round picks, and $20 million in cash. Larry Bertuzzi found that Flyers GM Russ Farwell's call to Eric Lindros to gauge whether or not he would play for the Flyers was a determining factor and thus voided the trade to New York. Lindros would go on to score 290 goals and 659 points in 486 games in Philadelphia, living up to the next one moniker that was given to him while he was a prospect with the Oshawa Generals. After a midseason trade during the 1994-95 lockout-shortened season, which sent Mark Recchi to Montreal for Eric Desjardins and John LeClair, Lindros and LeClair would form the vaunted Legion of Doom line with Michael Renberg, and that line became one of the most feared lines of the 1990s. However, Lindros would be the one with the last laugh, as he would win the Hart Trophy as league MVP that year. Following year, Lindros would register career highs in goals with 47, assists with 68, and points with 115. The next year, Lindros would lead the Flyers to the Stanley Cup Finals, where they were swept by the Detroit Red Wings in 4 games. Lindros would lead the NHL in postseason points, scoring 26 points in 19 games. After that is when the issues started. A slew of concussions that Lindros suffered became public knowledge and caused one of the most controversial sagas in professional sports over a 2+ year span. Lindros and Flyers GM Bobby Clarke fired shots at each other in the media, and it led to Lindros sitting the entire 2000-2001 season out to a contract dispute. That summer, the Flyers would deal Lindros to the New York Rangers for Jan Hlavich, Kim Janssen, Pavel Brendel, and a 2003 third-round pick, which ended up becoming Stefan Ruzicka. Many forget that James Patrick had a career year in 91-92, scoring 70 points. The Rangers would eventually deal Patrick as part of a massive November 1993 deal to Hartford, which brought Steve Larmer to New York, and Larmer ended up becoming a key component in the Rangers' 1994 Stanley Cup win. After scoring 84 goals and 183 points in 283 games as a Ranger, Amonte was dealt to Chicago in a flurry of deadline deals prior to the 1994 trade deadline, as he didn't mesh with coach Mike Keenan. Nemchinov and Kovalov were key cogs in the Rangers' 94 playoff run and would stay in New York for years after, eventually being dealt to Vancouver and Pittsburgh respectively. Richter would backstop the Rangers to the 1994 Stanley Cup, then win tournament MVP at the 1996 World Cup of Hockey, and was a starter for the 98 and 2002 U.S. Olympic teams. He would retire holding just about every Rangers franchise goaltending record. Van Beesbroek, on the other hand, was traded to the Canucks for Doug Lidster, who logged important minutes for the Rangers in their run to the 1994 Stanley Cup. The Canucks then exposed Van Beesbroek in the 93 expansion draft, in which he was taken by the Florida Panthers. Van Beesbroek, from 94 through 97, would establish himself as one of the best goalies in the world, with 2nd, 5th, 7th, and 7th place finishes in Vezina voting, while backstopping the underdog Florida Panthers to the Stanley Cup Finals in 1996, where they were swept by the Colorado Avalanche. The hypothetical impact here is that with Patrick, who was dealt for Larmer, Amonte, who was dealt for Noonan and Matteau, Kovalov, Nemchinov, and one of Richter or Van Beesbroek, all in Quebec, the Rangers would likely not win the Cup in 1994. I don't see how they could have done it. There would have had to have been major moves made in a very short time to make them a champion in 94. However, they would have one of the most feared 1-2 punches at center in NHL history, with a Mark Messier still in his prime years and a young Eric Lindros before the concussions. With a core of Messier, Lindros, Graves, Leach, and one of Richter or Van Beesbroek, the Rangers would have still had an excellent core, which would have been a perennial cup threat and possibly won a cup or two further down the line. At the 1977 NHL draft, the Rangers passed twice on drafting Mike Bossy, who had one of the most decorated junior careers of all time in the QMJHL, scoring 308 goals and 529 points in only 259 games for the Laval National. The Rangers would draft Lucien Dubois and Ron Duguay at 13th overall. Bossy would be taken by the rival upstart New York Islanders at 15th overall. The fallout here is that Bossy would go on to have one of the best careers ever, scoring 573 goals and 1,126 points in 752 games, finishing with the highest goals per game average of any player who has played a minimum career 700 games, finishing just above Mario Lemieux. Bossy would be the offensive linchpin of the Islanders dynasty teams, helping them to win 4 consecutive Stanley Cups by scoring 50 goals in 9 consecutive seasons, still an NHL record, and held the NHL's rookie goal-scoring record with 53 goals until Teemu Selanne shattered the record with a 76-goal rookie campaign in the 1992-93 season. The Rangers came away with Dubois, who was a decent player in his own right, but they traded him to Colorado at the age of 22 in a deal along with Pat Hickey, Mike McEwen, and Dean Turner that brought Barry Beck to New York, who went 2nd overall in the same 1977 amateur draft. Dubois would come back to the Rangers as a free agent years later, but was not the same player that he ended up becoming in Colorado and Winnipeg. In Duguay, the Rangers got a talented young forward who played multiple positions and was a phenomenal skater. He looked like a celebrity and was one of the Rangers that even appeared in a Sasson Jeans commercial along with Phil Esposito, Dave Maloney, and Anders Hedberg. Duguay scored a career-high 40 goals along with 76 points in the 1981-82 season, but after a dismal 82-83 season and rumors of him being a bit of a party animal, he was dealt to the Detroit Red Wings along with Eddie Johnstone and Eddie Mio from Mike Blaisdell, Willie Huber, and Mark Osborne. Duguay would eventually make his way back to New York in a January 1987 trade, but that didn't last long as he was dealt in the middle of the following season to the Los Angeles Kings. The hypothetical impact here is I believe that Bossy's the most important Islander of all time. Once his back injuries became a thing, the Islanders weren't the same. And you take him away from a upstart rival, the Islanders, and you put him on the Rangers probably end their cup drought sooner, and maybe the Islanders never get off the ground. It would have changed the entire trajectory of the rivalry. Imagine Bossy playing with Phil Esposito, Anders Hedberg, and Ulf Nilsson on Broadway. The Rangers likely would have been a powerhouse in the 80s. Maybe Bossy doesn't score 560-goal seasons and has seasons of 130 and 140 points, but Bossy probably would have been a player that still would have been a 50-plus, 100-plus point player every year, even on Broadway. After approval of a new collective bargaining agreement, which spelled the end of the 2004-2005 lockout, the NHL held a modified draft lottery to determine who would get the first overall pick in the 2005 NHL entry draft, as there was no season to run an order off of. The draft lottery was weighted, with teams who did not make the playoffs in the 3 previous seasons would receive 3 lottery balls. Now, before we go any further with this, I'm going to have to rewind about 24 hours to July 21st, 2005. In an interview with TSN's Off the Record with Michael Landsberg, star center Jeremy Roenick was quoted as saying, "I say you throw the balls away. The Rangers haven't made the playoffs in 7 years. You have the most acclimated kid coming into hockey since Mario Lemieux. Don't make a big mistake with this kid. Put him in the biggest market, the biggest media market, especially to a team that has to make the playoffs, or they'll lose all their fans. And let Sidney Crosby come to the game and make it better, because everyone is going to see him in New York." Despite the ringing endorsement from the now Hall of Fame bound Roenick, the Rangers conspicuously landed in 16th overall in the lottery the day later after those comments were made. The fallout from this is that some believe that the draft was rigged to save the Penguins, as then part owner Mario Lemieux and Commissioner Gary Bettman had a very good friendship for years. The requirements were kind of screwy, as the first overall pick parameter spanned for the previous 4 seasons going back to the 2000-2001 season, as that was the year that Lemieux had returned from retirement, and that would have given the Penguins 2 lottery balls instead of 3. But the playoff parameter was only 4 seasons. The first overall parameter pick was 3. Why weren't both parameters 4 seasons? Well, the parameters, the way they were set up, gave Pittsburgh 3 lottery balls instead of 2, and Pittsburgh won the lottery and selected Crosby first overall, with Crosby still to this day carving a legendary career that has seen him become one of the best first overall picks ever. Check out our video on that. Racking up 3 Stanley Cups, 2 Conn Smythe trophies, 2 Rockover Shark trophies, 2 Art Ross trophies, 2 Hart trophies, and 2 Olympic gold medals, with many considering him one of the 10 greatest players of all time. The Rangers, on the other hand, well, they would move up from 16 to 12 to draft Mark Stahl, played 13 seasons in New York and was instrumental in 2 runs to the Eastern Conference Finals and another to the Stanley Cup Finals. Hypothetical impact here is that Sidney Crosby comes to the biggest American hockey market in the biggest city in the world and is instantly paired with star winger Jaromir Jagr, who had one of his best seasons in 2005-2006, scoring 54 goals and 123 points, both of which are Rangers franchise records to this day. Those totals probably increase, and Crosby probably scores more than the 102 points he scored with Pittsburgh that year, which also would be a Rangers rookie record. The immediate impact allows them to target Zdeno Chara, in addition to Patrick Elias in the summer of 2006, who the Rangers had almost signed to a deal, according to Elias himself. Watch his interview with Spittin' Chicklets in 2021 regarding that one, as the deal fell through due to Glenn Sather not wanting to include a no-trade clause in the deal. That could have been a factor in convincing Chara to sign in New York, and maybe the Rangers win multiple cups instead of Pittsburgh. As for these hypothetical scenarios, what did you think? Were there any that I missed? Was there something that you would have booted out of the top 10? Maybe the Rangers beating Pittsburgh in 1992. Maybe the Rangers completing the Jagr trade in the summer of 2001 instead of getting him 3 years later in January of 2004. Let us know what you think in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe. Let everybody know about Big Apple Hockey, and let us know what you think about our countdown of the list of the biggest Rangers what-ifs.
Your ideas are intriguing to me, and I wish to subscribe to your newsletter.